we as photographers have, especially those of us who have had the privilege to travel across the world, as I have, we have a responsibility to shape a narrative or create imagery that resonates with a viewer on either an emotional level or can move an individual to action. And a lot of my work has been about that. However, I point these out because these are really fantastically beautiful photographs at first glance. They provide, in the early days of photography, a lot of colonialists were sent out into the world to provide this unique perspective of the other. Oftentimes, however, the other was informed by their colonialist ideas themselves, right? So, while these photographs are really beautiful, they don't necessarily highlight the reality of life in India at the time when they were taken. Primarily because they wanted to have this kind of exotified idea of the other, of the East, to continue narratives that would allow for colonialism to spread. I want to take a walk over to the next gallery, if you will follow me. Now, oftentimes, oh wait, sorry. Life, I didn't realize they're right here.
Sorry, I'm starting to figure out more about
Now, when we think about place in photography, right, like, we can talk about a physical idea of seeing something that and bringing something to the viewer that most people haven't had the opportunity or may never have the opportunity to see themselves, right? So in the early 20th century and late 19th century, at the advent of photography, this was one of the key things that was happening, right? Especially with photographers who were commissioned to go out into the West for the expansion of the West. At the time, this is where we start to see place as a tool for expansion and colonialism as well, right? Oftentimes, photographers would go out and capture these breathtaking and absolutely stunning landscapes of the Western frontier. But one of the things that was noticeably missing from a lot of these like iconic Western photographs is people, the indigenous population who lived on the land. And this was very intentional, right? So once again, this is kind of creating this idea of place that allows for expansion, but without the ugly side of expansion, right? Which we all know ultimately ended up in being forms of genocide, removal, replacement, and ultimately the stealing of the land of the indigenous people in this nation, right? So, this is the use of photography and place and the relation to place as a tool for propaganda, as a tool for political gain, as a tool for economic gain, right? For those who were privileged enough at the time to create such imagery. Knowing that these types of images would resonate with those who were looking for the promise of success, the promise of freedom, for the promise of expansion, and not criticizing their will and their determination and their struggle to succeed and be who they were. But at what cost? And as a photographer, how do we craft these narratives? How do we tell these stories? And how do we maintain our honesty and our integrity while we're doing such, right? Another thing that I kind of want to talk about is perspective. Perspective is everything. I'd like for everybody to kind of take a look at this photo. This is one of the photos that stands out to me about perspective. This is a photo of a scene during World War II. You can see here at the top of the hill, you have Nazi soldiers who are currently engaged in what appears to be a very intense battle. You have a guy here with his binoculars kind of surveying the area, trying to figure out what's going on. And it just seems like they're kind of running to either their victory or their death. And then, if you familiarize yourself with this particular photographer, who is all about perspective, you then realize that these are actually toys, and this is a tennis ball. This mound is a tennis ball. So, once again, that excitement, that story that we tell through imagery that resonates with us, that kind of speaks to our hearts, that pulls on our heartstrings, that gets our blood flowing and gets us excited, oftentimes can be completely false, completely fictional. So, once again, it is so important for the photographer to be honest in their capturing of a situation. I don't think that there's no malintent here in this, but it is a conversation piece, it's a conversation starter, and I'm not sure, did anyone else here know that those were toys while I was describing it?
No.
Or did anyone here assume that they were toys while I was describing it? No. Exactly. So, once again, photographers have a great amount of power, and not to quote Spider-Man, but with great power comes a great responsibility, right? And that is true. I have managed to shift complete narratives over the course of my career, and really change the way that people see things. I often find myself in situations with individuals who no one wants to sit down with, who no one wants to talk to, primarily because of either their affiliations or their direct actions. A number of my friends think I'm absolutely crazy for spending time with the KKK, for sitting down with neo-Nazis and trying to understand, not understand because there's really nothing to understand here, but gain perspective into why they feel the way that they do and why they espouse the types of hate that they do. And it's important for me to hear them in a way that is not confrontational. Many times, to give you a perfect example, I was in Charlottesville during the entire Charlottesville fracas, and I don't know how many of you remember the night of the Torch March. Now, let's back up a little bit. I had been documenting like I said, I've been documenting kind of the rise of the alt-right. Really, I started paying attention to the way that the political discourse was turning towards exclusion as opposed to inclusion here in this country. Right around 2008, when Barack Obama was elected, we saw kind of the rise of the other, the alternative to this kind of new new era that had been ushered in with the election of Barack Obama, that had been hailed as the end of racism and all these other ridiculous things. Ground Zero Mosque was kind of the first experience for me. I was in New York documenting the Ground Zero Mosque. I don't know how many of you remember that. And someone casually turned to me and asked if I was Muslim, and to which I replied yes. And I was then attacked and escorted all out of the area by NYPD while I was trying to document this. So I've really had it's been more than just the past few years that we kind of started to see the rise of this kind of ideology again. And for me, I found it really important to document this in a very honest way. So back to Charlottesville. I was in Charlottesville during this Torch March amongst those who hate me, to say the least. However, I had been building a relationship with a lot of the people who were in the leadership of these organizations over the course of time because I wanted to accurately be able to tell their story from both my perspective in being engaged with them, but also from their perspective and kind of tell their narrative and what their ideas of what they were doing to save, quote unquote, their country. There were instances in which I could have been attacked. There are instances in which I could have been killed. There are instances in which I was about to be attacked. And because I took the time to sit down with leadership and other individuals within these organizations, litany of organizations, they were the ones who actually came to my defense in those moments, which was very shocking to me, right? Now, does that make me sympathetic to their cause? Of course not. I'm Black. I'm also Jewish by birth. So that is not something that I felt I feel inclined to believe or be sympathetic to. However, because I didn't hit the ground running, I just wasn't another photographer shoving a camera in their face without any real thought behind it. It allowed me afforded me a certain level of access. And I want to talk a little bit about access too as a photographer. So if you guys want to focus a little bit of your attention, these are two pieces that really stand out to me from my perspective as a photographer. Access is everything, right? Now, one of the reasons that people gravitate towards my work is because, like I said, I oftentimes have the ability to gain access to unsavory characters or individuals that people are interested in knowing more about. These two photos, this one by Eric Solomon, at the very top is a photograph that was taken with a pinhole camera. These gentlemen didn't realize that they were being photographed, but there's a lot of power in this photo because this is kind of considered the inner circle, right? These are politicians that are gathered to discuss essentially the fate of the parties. And it's such a popular photograph because it provides that insight, right? Like you get this view on the inside that you never would have been able to get. You see the level of exasperation on their face. These great heroes, these great politicians no longer seem like these mighty, grand, undefeatable individuals. You see that they're human beings. You really get an opportunity. And this speaks to access, right? And how the relation of place and access is really, really grand. Another one, Gordon Parks, one of my favorite photographers ever. No one during the Civil Rights Movement had as much access as Gordon Parks. Some of the most incredible human beings to walk the face of the planet, people that we revere, people that we honor. But yet here, once again, you get to see Muhammad Ali in this photograph praying before a meal in this very intimate way, a way that he hadn't been portrayed. Most of the time, you think of Muhammad Ali, you float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, right? Like you're thinking of tough guy, but here you see him at his moment of pure subjugation to his God, praying in thanks for the sustenance in which they're about to receive. And I feel like that's really powerful, okay? That's the essence of what photography should do. It should bring you to these places and these moments that allow for you to connect with individuals in a way that is very, very intimate, very realistic, even if they're individuals that you don't necessarily agree with. Carrie Mae Weems. Now, one of the things that, as a photojournalist, I'm not really a person that enjoys posing my photography. I'm not a person that goes and creates a scene for other people to watch and to see. I prefer for it to be raw and realistic at the time. However, this exhibition, Brian, actually has really kind of pushed me in a way to reevaluate that and potentially consider the power of the post photograph. Now, I've always been a fan of Carrie Mae Weems. Carrie Mae Weems is arguably one of the greatest photographers and greatest storytellers in history. Her kitchen table series was profound, in my opinion. It took, this is in relation to place once again. We're talking about specifically the kitchen, right? And this entire series was focused around the kitchen table. And Carrie Mae Weems herself is in the photograph. She tends to be the subject, the primary subject in the photograph. And in this series, she really kind of explores her relationship to love, to family, to intimacy, but in a way that kind of reclaims that space and takes it out of this paternalistic kind of view of the woman's place being in the kitchen, and then utilizes that space, reclaims that space to show the power of the woman in this space and the importance of this space as a social vehicle, as a social tool, right? Like here are these wonderful moments of intimacy. We don't know who that gentleman is, and I think that this photo really adds to that we don't know who he is, right? But we see the level of intimacy kind of with him creeping up. We see her staring into our eyes as we, we're connecting directly, emotionally connecting with the viewer. And we've all had some level of intimacy in our life, so we know what it feels like to have someone near us, right? Like this to me is the essence of photography. It's the essence of being able to capture a moment and bring you into a feeling, an emotion, a space, and specifically a place. I'm obviously very much into art, and I obviously very much into garden parks. And yes, that's this. I want to focus our attention over here on this wall.